Jomo Kenyatta. First President of Kenya.
All he wanted to see is an African flag flying over Kenya.
President for 15 years, from 1963 to 1978. Died in Mombasa, 22nd of August 1978. Fast forward 34 years later.
Wow.
Meet Uhuru Kenyatta, son of the late Jomo Kenyatta. At the age of 51, Uhuru believes he can still fit in what were once his father's shoes.
Thank you, thank you.
With his eye on the presidency, to Uhuru it's all systems go. Uhuru's name is Swahili for freedom. The 6'4" tall Gatundu Member of Parliament is a charming man. With the general assumption that Uhuru was born and bred in Statehouse, his childhood is obviously being viewed by his critics as an all-rosy upbringing with silver linings every step of the way. Many believe Uhuru simply wants to inherit his late father's seat, but growing up in the first family, is Uhuru a pampered prince seeking the country's presidency from a platform of entitlement?
I would doubt very much that he was seeking to be president just because his father was president. It's been normal in other parts of the world as well that people who hail from families that have produced leaders at that level before have sought also to have a go at it. And I think it's a very normal and natural human happening. If your father was a coconut farmer, you are likely to try to be a coconut farmer. If he was running a bakery, you are likely to try to run a bakery. And if he was a football player, there's every likelihood that some people from the family would go that way. I do not think that they do that because they think that they have any special entitlement to that which they then aspire.
Uhuru Kenyatta did not decide to be the son of Jomo Kenyatta, and he's entitled to contest for the presidency. The bottom line is Kenyans are the ones to decide who becomes their next leader. And if Uhuru Kenyatta has offered himself and is elected to become the president of Kenya, we can't talk about the sense of entitlement because Kenyans will have elected him. So that issue of whether he's a sense of entitlement because his father was a president is neither here or there. The fact is he has the resources and he has a political constituency and is qualified to be the Kenyan president. It's up to Kenyans to decide whether they're going to elect him or not.
As a third born in his family, Uhuru was born on the 26th of October 1961 in Gatundu and attended St. Mary's School in Nairobi. From there he went on to study economics and political science at Amherst College in the United States. Uhuru was ushered into politics back in the 90s. At a young age, he was elected the chairman of the Kenya African National Union, KANU, Gatundu branch. At the time, this appointment was cited as a strategic move aimed at grooming the young Turk for bigger things ahead. Uhuru contested for the Gatundu South parliamentary seat in 1997. This seat was once held by his father, Jomo Kenyatta. He lost the election and was extremely upset and even deliberated on quitting politics. this did not deter his dreams of one day playing in the Kenya's political arena. And so, as Uhuru pondered on his next move, he had absolutely no clue that the then President Daniel Arap Moi had his interests at heart and was still keen on propelling him onto the political platform. In the year 1999, Moi appointed Uhuru the new chairman of the Kenya Tourism Board KTB. And as his grooming blossomed came October 2001 that saw him being nominated to Parliament and thereafter found his way into cabinet as Minister for Local Government. He was later to be elected as one of the 4 national vice-chairmen of KANU, alongside Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, and the late George Saitoti.
Uhuru Kenyatta should be seen as a member of a new generation that represents the same old order that has been there. As you know, there is such a thing as natural attrition, and there's also such a thing as birth, that there is procreation, that as living things get old and they start reckoning with the reality that they will not always be there, they want to see one of their own succeeding them. If and when you have somebody like Uhuru Kenyatta taking over, you witness a change of guard. You do not witness a fundamental change. It's the same old order with a new guard in place.
Despite Uhuru's political inexperience at the time, Moi favored him and publicly endorsed him as his preferred successor.
Uhuru Kenyatta na wenzao wataendesha serikali, sio Moi. Kwa sababu dunia hii imeenda ukabila, vyama vyote vya kikabila, na nikaona kwamba yule ambaye anaweza kuendesha kupeleka wananchi kama vile mimi ningependelea wananchi kuongozwa ni Uhuru Kenyatta.
A move that did not all go well with the general public, and Uhuru was therefore tagged Moi Project in the political sphere.
He just wanted a preferred successor, and that was Uhuru Kenyatta. And if Uhuru Kenyatta of KANU had succeeded Moi, then the status quo would have remained.
Came the year 2002, and Moi's candidate of choice, Uhuru Kenyatta, contested the presidency on a KANU ticket in the December presidential election.
So what happened in 2002 was that the opposition was able to unite. That is, we had Mwai Kibaki with NARC, and then we had Raila Odinga also coming in, and they were able to defeat Uhuru Kenyatta. So that's, to me, pure and simple what happened.
Uhuru lost marginally to opposition candidate Mwai Kibaki. He garnered 31% of the votes against Kibaki's 62%. Having lost the Statehouse bid, Uhuru subsequently became leader of the official opposition in Parliament. And 5 years later, in 2007, it was election time again, and Uhuru decided to bury his presidential dream and opted to back Mwai Kibaki's re-election crusade.
It's now clear that Kibaki must eventually step down and get away from power. You need somebody who has been preparing for the past 5 years, because it was pre-negotiated that he drops his presidential bid in 2007. He supports President Mwai Kibaki to complete his term, and in turn he will be given the opportunity and the necessary support to go for it next time round.
The 2007 elections proved to be extremely controversial, and Kibaki was declared the victor and sworn in late in the evening amidst claims of electoral malpractice from his challenger Raila Odinga of the Orange Democratic Movement, ODM. The country was thrown into ethnic bloodbath that lasted at least 2 months. Former UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, under the umbrella of Africa Union Panel of Eminent Persons, visited the country to spearhead a peace process that ultimately ended the nationwide ethnic conflict. Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga reached a power-sharing agreement that gave birth to the coalition government. In this coalition government, Kibaki was president and Raila Odinga prime minister. Under the partnership arrangement, there was provision for the positions of 2 deputy prime ministers. Kenyatta was named one of the deputy prime ministers from Kibaki's arm of government alongside Musalia Mudavadi from Raila's arm of the coalition government. After peace was restored in the nation, Kibaki later appointed Kenyatta as Minister for Local Government in 2008. Later he was named Minister for Trade and subsequently Minister for Finance from 2009 to 2012. Uhuru held 3 key positions at the same time: Member of Parliament, Minister for Finance and Deputy Prime Minister. While serving as Finance Minister, Uhuru is credited with some successful reform measures he instilled in the money docket that have seen a change in how Treasury and government as a whole conducts its business.
Let us resist, honourable members, the temptation to fall back to partisan politics and alliances that have reversed the gains we have worked so hard to build.
Some of these reforms include launching of the Economic Stimulus Program, a program that aims to stimulate economic activity, create employment opportunities, and encourage innovation in wealth creation. Cutting government expenditure. In 2009, Uhuru Kenyatta directed that government ministers, along with assistant ministers and permanent secretaries, should turn in their Mercedes-Benz government cars for Volkswagen Passats. In doing this, he aimed not only to reduce government car costs to about 2/3 the price of a Mercedes-Benz, but also to reduce the cost of running and maintaining these cars. Through these measures, the government saved the taxpayers at least 2.3 billion shillings. Use of social media in the budget-making process. Citing Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya, which recognizes inclusiveness as part of the national values and principles of governance, the minister said he was pursuing a more inclusive means of formulating the document. Hence, Treasury invited Kenyans on Twitter to tweet their budget views. Within minutes, more than 300 citizens had submitted responses to the Treasury using an online document that asked questions and also proposed measures on funding and how the government could increase its tax intake. Could his achievements as finance boss boost his presidential bid?
I don't think that matters now, whatever Uhuru Kenyatta did. And even on the campaign trail, you don't hear Uhuru speaking a lot about what he did in the Ministry of Finance, because it's a government job that he was doing. And so right now, I think Uhuru's calculations were besides what he was doing as the Minister for Finance. Yes, it's true that he did a lot to involve the youth in terms of in public participation in the budget making process, but I don't think that will really help him in terms of his race to succeed President Mwai Kibaki. I think the calculation is if he can get the Mount Kenya vote behind him, and William Ruto also packs in the Kalenjin vote from Rift Valley, then if you're looking at the absolute numbers, they have an advantage over their competitors.
If we were to go purely on the basis of economic growth and indices and say that these were the reasons why someone should be voted into office in the African context and definitely in Kenya, it would not work. Yes, the economy has grown. You cannot doubt that because numbers do not lie. The economy has grown. But it's also true that those who live in abjectness have found themselves sinking deeper into abjectness. So you cannot use those indices in a situation such as ours and think it can win you votes.
In spite of his huge success at the helm of Treasury, graft allegations rocked his finance ministry when serious budgetary discrepancies were reported. On the 29th of April 2009, Uhuru faced a scare after he presented a supplementary budget that was approved by Parliament. The purpose of this supplementary budget was to cover the deficit that had arisen due to the sluggish economic growth that Kenya had experienced. The government required an additional 40 billion shillings, but compromised on a figure of 22 billion shillings, putting aside non-priority expenses. Uhuru had presented the bill which Parliament unanimously voted for, but soon after questions were being raised when Imenti Central MP Gitobu Imanyara cited discrepancies as to what exactly had been approved by the House. According to Imanyara, it appeared as though Parliament had voted on 31 billion shillings as opposed to 22 billion shillings that they thought they were voting on, the difference totaling to 9.2 billion shillings. Uhuru defended the budget bill that had just been passed but later admitted that there were computer or typographical errors in the budget bill. Uhuru was later investigated by the CID and Parliamentary Committee. He was cleared of any wrongdoing by the Joint Finance and Budgetary Committee after investigations were concluded.
In a different part of the world, he would have resigned. He would have been investigated, and the nation would have been given a truthful picture, or a comprehensive picture for that matter. It's possible that what we were told was truthful, but it was not convincing. It was not comprehensive. And this might be something which future generations may want to reopen, go back into these budgets and ask ourselves, have we had these so-called typographical errors in our budgets through our history? Was it the first time? Was it the only time? Those are things that need to be interrogated.
Accused by the International Criminal Court ICC of committing crimes against humanity in relation to the violent aftermath of the 2007 election, Uhuru Kenyatta was named as a suspect by the ICC prosecutor Luis Moreno Campo on the 15th of December 2010, with allegations of planning and funding violence in Naivasha and Nakuru. According to the ICC charges, Kenyatta's accusations include murder, persecution, and deportation or forcible transfer of a population. Uhuru has been accused of committing these crimes as an indirect co-perpetrator.
My names are Uhuru Kenyatta. I was born on the 26th of October 1961 in Nairobi, Kenya. Currently, courtesy of the people of Gatundu South, their Member of Parliament, and courtesy of the duly elected President of Kenya, I am a Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Still with the ongoing cases at the Hague-based court, on January 2012, calls of resignation forced Uhuru to step down as finance minister, a position that he officially handed over to Njeru Githai in an acting capacity.
As I go, there are a number of issues that will continue to require your attention and immediate attention.
However, he still retained his job as Deputy Prime Minister, a position that can only be challenged through a censure motion in Parliament. Can the ICC case against him impede his presidential dream?
The one thing that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, the one thing that united them and made them form a ticket in 2013 was that ICC process. And I think what they are trying to do is to galvanize their support and say, if they are going to win this election in 2013, then they are sending a message to the international community, they are sending a message to the ICC. They are saying that these two communities that are alleged to have clashed in 2007 are the same communities that are now working together towards electing the same set of leaders. So their message is very simple to the ICC. They are transforming this election into a referendum of sorts on the ICC and saying, hey, if Kenyans are willing to elect these leaders into office, then who is the international community to say we cannot work with these leaders? And that, I think, is the main reason why we have the Jubilee Alliance, to actually have a referendum on the ICC process and tell the international community that if Kenyans who suffered in 2007 are willing to elect the same set of leaders into office, then nobody can say that, they should not be in office.
The ICC is definitely an election issue. We cannot pretend that it is not. That William Ruto, who is Uhuru's running mate, and Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta himself are joined at the hip by the sword of Damocles that is called the impending ICC trials, that they find that their fate is beholden to each other, and they have come together. At the start of last year, they went across the country from one corner to the other, from one nook to one cranny, talking about the ICC in what were called prayer meetings, but which were essentially campaign for election forums, with the ICC as the agenda, and trying to encourage the local, shall we say, tribal communities from which they hail to look at the impending election as an ICC affair, and to vote in this election as a referendum on the ICC. It remains so. It cannot be wished away.
Kenyatta made a previous attempt at the presidency in 2002, but was overwhelmingly defeated by opposition candidate at the time, Mwai Kibaki. Fast forward 10 years later, and Uhuru believes his long wait could soon pay off. So how different is the Uhuru Kenyatta of 2002 and that of 2013?
There's a whole lot of difference. Number one, Uhuru Kenyatta has matured as a politician. He's been now in politics for more than 10 years as a very strong personality, and he also has managed to work out his own base in terms of constituency in central Kenya. I think you need to remember that Uhuru Kenyatta came to parliament in 1990. He came through a nomination. Mark Too was forced to step down so that Uhuru Kenyatta would be nominated as a member of parliament. Unlike in 2002, where Mwai Kibaki was also there, and Mwai Kibaki defeated him in central Kenya. This time round, he has that backing, and also he has been able to cultivate a national constituency as a leader. That's the difference. Right now, he's a very, very strong presidential candidate.
He has gone through the crucible. He is by and large his own man, even as he remains a candidate for status quo. You see, even when you talk about status quo, there will be a wide platform of crown princes or pretenders to the crown. And for you to stand out and to be the one around whom people are rallying, you must have certain inherent, certain endearing qualities that are immanent in you. You are a person who has regenerated yourself to get everybody from definitely your location of the country rallying around you, and then you go further afield. So this is very much a man whom we can call his own man, even as he represents the status quo.
With the presidential contest getting hotter by the day, candidates are spending sleepless nights working on winning formulas. Alliances and pre-election pacts have been sealed and agreements deposited with the registrar of political parties. All these are efforts geared towards attaining the required vote percentage as stipulated in the new constitution, where the winning candidate must garner more than 50% of the total votes cast, and at least 25% of the votes cast in 24 counties. If these numbers are not achieved, a runoff will be held between the two top candidates. Can Uhuru measure up to the threshold?
First, regarding the 25% in at least half of the counties, I have very little doubt about the possibility that Mr. Kenyatta can get this. There is every indication that he can get that from counties in Central Province, Nairobi, from counties at the coast, in Rift Valley, and in other parts of the country as well. That shouldn't be a big challenge to him. The challenge resides, however, I think, in getting 50% plus one. That is going to be a big riddle both for Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga, who seem to be the two foremost candidates. Between now and the polling day, however, because they say one day is a whole eon in politics, anything can happen. We have been told of a huge swath of undecided voters, and they could decide to vote for him. If they say that he's sitting at about 40%, and you're being told of between 13 and 15% undecided voters, mathematically speaking, it is possible that he could get it.
At this particular stage, there are only two candidates who can actually fulfill those constitutional requirements. That's Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. But the partnership between Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto gives him some sort of a head start in terms of at least getting 25% in at least 24 counties, which is a constitutional requirement. Whether he can get 50% plus one of the votes cast is not yet clear, but the opinion polls that are out so far suggests no single presidential candidate might get 50 plus one in the first round. It seems to, all the opinion polls seem to suggest we could be in for a runoff, which essentially means none of the contestants might end up getting 50 plus one in the first round.
So, what is a runoff? When is a runoff applied?
A runoff will be triggered in the event that none of the presidential candidates gets 50 plus one of the total votes cast. So we assume that if, let's say, 8 million Kenyans cast their votes, at least the winning candidate, for there not to be a runoff, the winning candidate must get 4 million votes and one extra vote. So that 4 million and one votes, at least for there to be declared a winner in the first round. So that's what it means, 50 plus 1. Now, in the event nobody gets 50 plus 1, we must go for a runoff. And a runoff will be between the candidate who came as number 1 and the candidate who came as number 2. In the run-up, which will be held at least 30 days after the announcement of the results, it doesn't have now to be 50 plus 1. It's any victory in the runoff. So in the runoff, a person could as well win with whatever percentage. So it doesn't have to be 50 plus 1 in the runoff. But in the first round, it has to be 50 plus 1 for somebody to win.
Uhuru Kenyatta has enjoyed endorsement from the elite and very powerful political and business class from central Kenya, including the influential minister and businessman, the late John Mishuki.
Uhuru wa Kenyatta ndiye atakuwa kiongozi wa Kikuyu kulingana na maoni yangu.
Does this endorsement make Uhuru a status quo candidate?
Well, if you ask Uhuru Kenyatta, he doesn't think he's a status quo. First of all, he's campaigning on a generational change plank. He's trying to say that this is the year of Jubilee, where Kenya is celebrating 50 years of independence. And the argument is he's also 50 years old. I think he's turning 51 this year. And so they are trying to say it's not a status quo as their opponents would want to suggest. But also it depends on what you mean by status quo. If you mean that the political families or dynasties that have ruled this country remain in power, you could argue so. Among all the candidates that are there, most of them are in government. Uhuru Kenyatta is in government, Raila Odinga is in government, Kalonzo Musyoka is in government. William Ruto, of course, had to drop as an assistant minister because of the cases that he was facing, and he never made it back, but he was also in government. So the issue of status quo could apply to either side.
The endorsement of people like Michuki, and who I trust was a sounding board for other people, including President Mwai Kibaki, so that when they come out and say it is Uhuru Muigai wa Kenyatta, their endorsement ultimately is icing on the cake, because this gentleman, let us give it to him, has done his work, and he has done it well, to become the de facto leader of that community in what is unfortunately a tribalized electoral environment that we live in.
Uhuru originates from the Kikuyu community in central Kenya, with his late father Jomo Kenyatta and the outgoing President Mwai Kibaki also from the same region. How will his ethnicity impact on his aspiration?
He has got under the wraps the largest voting bloc in Kenya. We saw that out of the 14 million registered voters, central Kenya has got about 4 million already, slightly above 4 million in fact, I think. And when you bring William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta together from the platform, the narrow parochial platform of ethnicity as a factor in the exercise of power, one can say that it is continuation of domination by the self-same two communities that have exercised power before. And being conscious of this, you can see that they have been very careful in their political campaigns to downplay the ethnic factor.
Could the Jomo Kenyatta and Mwai Kibaki legacy prove to be a double-edged sword in his campaign?
Uhuru Kenyatta had indicated that he would support Musalia Mudavadi as the presidential candidate of the Jubilee coalition. Well, I think thereafter there was too much pressure from Uhuru supporters that, they didn't accept that deal. So Uhuru had to back down, and that is why we find now where we find ourselves, we're in the situation that we are in. So yeah, it could be a double-edged sword for Uhuru Kenyatta, depending on how this issue plays up in the final days to the March 4th general election.
Recent opinion polls by Infotrack and Sinovet have rated Uhuru Kenyatta as Prime Minister Raila Odinga's main challenger in the 2013 race to Statehouse, enjoying a margin of between 40% and 42% popularity against a 44% and 46% claimed by Raila. Where do these polls place Uhuru's chances realistically?
Given that scenario, Raila Odinga could make a mistake between now and polling day. He could say something that outrages the electorate. Unfortunately, politics and political campaigns are about going out there to say things. And you will go out there, you will open your mouth and put your foot in it. And that will be it. It will narrow the gap overnight. So either of the two gentlemen is going to be Kenya's next president, I sincerely believe, and it is too soon to try to write off anybody.
So it's a 50-50 thing. It's on the edge. That one we can be certain about. You can take that to the bank. The president of Kenya after March 4th will either be Uhuru Kenyatta or Raila Odinga.
What are Uhuru's chances according to the Kenyan public?
The opinion polls are very clear. Raila is leading with over 7%. The chances of Uhuru winning, I don't think it's not going to win.
For me, I believe if it's about issue base, chances are 50-50. But if it's about tribe, I see Uhuru winning, because they have most votes in Rift Valley, which are the best places where people have registered. We have Central and Rift Valley. If we have 3 billion, 3 million, and we say at least 80% go to Uhuru, that's it.
So Uhuru candidature, well, is misplaced.
So his chances in this race?
Doesn't have any chance.
Uhuru has got very good points, and he looks focused. And I don't think Raila can win this race.
What are the chances?
Chances are none. Uhuru has Uhuru will win.
The main undoing thing is the ICC, because where we are, whether he's innocent or guilty, he still stands an accused person, and especially for the summons that are coming at this time round, at this crucial time when the people are supposed to make a decision. I think that one is going to challenge the duo, that is Uhuru and Honorable Ruto.
His chances are good, very good, very good. Very good.
50-50, Jubilee, 50-50.
On 20th of May 2012, Uhuru Kenyatta launched the National Alliance Party TNA as his preferred party of choice in the 2013 presidential race. The party slogan is, I believe, tunaweza.
I believe, nchi moja, ndoto moja, naamini, Kenya. I believe, nchi moja, ndoto moja.
In a launch that was beamed live from KICC Nairobi, Uhuru affirmed his strong desire for the country's leadership, saying his presidency will mark a new dawn.
Today, as we launch the National Alliance, the alliance of believers, a vessel in which Kenya will sail to the shores of unity, peace, and prosperity.
Uhuru's TNA party has a dove symbol representing peace, According to observers, the choice of a dove is a well-thought idea that comes in handy to counteract the tag of aggression on his head ensuing from allegations of having funded crimes against humanity following the 2007 elections.
The choice of the dove was deliberate, was a clever one for Uhuru and TNA, because he's been indicted for the worst crimes that the human mind could possibly conceive. And he wants to demonstrate that he is different, he's not that. And William Ruto, who is co-indicted with him from the opposite side of those who clashed in 2007-2008, joins in, and so they meet very snugly under the wings of this dove.
If elected president, how does Uhuru intend to reconcile a country that is still recovering from the effects of ethnic wars?
He needs to start winning Kenyans' confidence that if he became president, he would not be a vindictive leader who would round up his opponents and throw them in detention or something like that. And his minders need to look at that aspect of his projection of himself to the public.
Uhuru Kenyatta and his counterpart William Ruto had publicly signed a pre-election deal and deposited the agreement with the Registrar of Political Parties. In this deal, the two parties, that is Uhuru's TNA and Ruto's URP, agreed to share power on a 50-50 basis. Uhuru will be president and Ruto vice president. Out of the 22 available ministerial posts, 11 will belong to TNA and another 11 to URP. However, after signing the pact, a day later, the two parties received Deputy Prime Minister and Member of Parliament for Sabatia Musalia Mudavadi. On a day that witnessed a lot of confusion and last-minute rush as parties were busy closing down on partnering deals, Mr. Kenyatta, the National Alliance TNA, Mr. Mudavadi, United Democratic Forum UDF, and Mr. Ruto, United Republican Party URP, amended the earlier deal between Uhuru and Ruto to accommodate and bring on board the Sabatia Member of Parliament. According to close sources at the time, the new deal stated that Uhuru and Mudavadi will fight for the coalition's presidential ticket through a joint party nomination, while Mr. Ruto retains the running mate position regardless of who wins the party nomination ticket. The three-party alliance was then dubbed the Jubilee Coalition. But not long after, the newfound marriage started rocking when a disagreement occurred after the United Democratic Forum UDF party leader Musalia Mudavadi claimed Uhuru Kenyatta had promised to withdraw his presidential candidature in his favor.
He had decided to withdraw his candidature and wished to support me as the coalition candidate.
Mudavadi said he had signed an agreement with the National Alliance TNA leader in the presence of their lawyers and Eldoret North Member of Parliament William Ruto, the third pillar of the Jubilee Alliance. This deal was not honoured even after Uhuru admitted Mudavadi's claims as true and TNA delegates rejected it, leaving Mudavadi back to the drawing board.
Whether it be that that agreement was entered into through coercion, undue influence, blackmail, or whatsoever kind of duress, we as a party do say we are not a party to it.
Uhuru Kenyatta, after doing a boardroom deal with Musalia Mudavadi and William Ruto, and coming out and announcing that he will not be on the ballot paper, but William Ruto will be the running mate and Musalia Mudavadi will be the presidential candidate, immediately thereafter, they agreed. And I think a week after, Uhuru Kenyatta went out on a blitz, trying to talk directly to the Kikuyu voters and telling them that we have been informed that if either me or William Ruto become the president, then there will be a backlash on the because of the ICC issue. There will be sanctions against Kenya. And therefore, that's why we are deciding to put Musalia Mudavadi as a presidential candidate. Of course, his supporters did not buy into that. His supporters refused to accept that. And Uhuru Kenyatta had to change his mind. And by changing his mind, something also happened. It happened that was around the time IEBC had just finished the voter registration. And when they did their calculations, they looked at the Mount Kenya votes, they looked at the Kalenjin votes, they realized that maybe they don't need Musalia Mudavadi if they're going to win. That's using raw numbers, because if you use their raw numbers, they seem to, they are convinced that they can get up to almost 7 million votes without Musalia Mudavadi's input.
UDF later quit the coalition.
Mudavadi left ODM as a spoiler. Either he knew that he was a spoiler or he did not know, in which case we must credit him with a lot of political naivety if he did not know that he was being recruited as a spoiler. If he knew what was happening, then we are likely to read tragic mischief in the so-called fallout between him and the Jubilees, because his role is simply and squarely to harvest and harness the Luhya vote and throw it into the pit latrine, so that that vote being denied Raila Odinga will give Uhuru and Jubilee the opportunity to romp home. And I sometimes imagine that he must know that this is indeed the ploy.
So, how will an Uhuru and Ruto presidency be like?
Like any government that has formed of, that is born out of a pre-election pact, there will be issues. But I think the real test of that government will come at the stage when the ICC issue is done. Because the glue that binds Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto is the ICC process. They were not natural partners before the ICC issue came about. So the day the ICC issue is done with, let's say the cases are dismissed, then everybody becomes their own person, then you are bound to see a lot of maybe internal conflicts within that coalition. But as long as the ICC issue remains alive, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto will remain the best of buddies, politically and personally.
It would be a very, very troubled presidency. Naturally, I wish them well. I wish their competitors well as well. But let us be very truthful about this. If the Jubilee coalition wins this election, that will not stop the ICC process. And therefore, the president and the deputy president have got one of two choices. One is to honor the summons and go to The Hague for their trial. And for a period of about 2 years, the country will be in a crisis. Because you do not have the president, you do not have his deputy, you do not know how the affairs of state should be run. In the alternative, they can dig in and say, we are not going. And I think that they've been preparing Kenyans and the world for that alternative. You listen to them, they've been saying, what we care for is the decision of the people of Kenya and our sovereignty. We do not care about foreigners and their thoughts and what they want to do. Which means that the day you have President Uhuru Kenyatta in Statehouse with William Ruto as deputy president, they will say, look, our people have spoken. We don't really care for you, and we are not honoring any summons. In which case, you must start preparing to live under sanctions. This is not a joke.
What does the Jubilee coalition represent?
Well, it's a potent force. It's a potent force, and you look at their strategy. They're looking at the youthful, the youthful voters. They're targeting them, and on location, you hear them. You hear them talking about Man UK. You know, Man UK trying to appeal to the urban youth, trying to appeal to the young people. They're also campaigning on a platform of generational change, and you can hear them saying that their rivals, their main rivals in the Code Alliance, are analog. And they're talking about, they're branding themselves as the digital generation. Now that's a potent force, because if this works out and they are able to excite this generation of very youthful voters and pull them to come out and vote on March 4th, they are a very, very powerful force. Remember, like I've told you earlier on, they pack the Mount Kenya vote. Some argue not in its entirety, but they also pack the Kalenjin vote. Maybe some not in its entirety, but it's a very potent force in this election.
Ruto and Uhuru are among 4 Kenyans facing crimes against humanity charges at the International Criminal Court (ICC) in The Hague. The question of integrity or suitability to hold public office, as enshrined in Article 10 of the Constitution, may still appear to be a thorn in the flesh for Uhuru. Analysts believe Mudavadi was encompassed in the New Deal as a compromise candidate to take over in the event Ruto and Uhuru's proceeding at the ICC proved to be a hindrance.
He was a compromise candidate, because if he was going to be a presidential candidate, then Uhuru Kenyatta was not going to be on the ballot. So something had to give way for Musalia Mudavadi to become the Jubilee presidential candidate.
If ever there was going to be a compromise candidate on the basis that maybe the courts had decided otherwise, that candidate was going to be Eugene Wamalwa. But these people are playing to a very clearly orchestrated and rehashed script that Mudavadi and Wamalwa discovering or being discovered, because these people have done their own opinion polls, they've done their surveys. In fact, one of the best planned and managed political campaigns for this election is the Uhuru Kenyatta camp. They have done it the way these things should be done. They have done their surveys, and the surveys have indicated that Wamalwa, if you are with us, you are not going to bring the Luhya vote on board. Mudavadi, if you are with us, you are not going to bring the Luhya vote on board. And this vote is going to go the ODM Raila Odinga way. So the best thing for us to do is to play up a separation, even a hostile one, so that the community that you come from will see you as a betrayed people, and they will feel bad about it, and they will vote for you. As they vote for you, you are securing that vote from going to our opponents.
If Uhuru is elected president and Ruto vice president, despite the ongoing ICC cases against them, what would be the projected impact and dynamics of prosecuting a sitting president and sitting vice president under the Rome Statute?
The cases are staggered, and they will not be required to be at The Hague all the time. They will just be going there, I think, for the initial appearance, and then subsequently their lawyers can argue their cases out, and if and when they are required, they will be there. Now remember, the constitution was changed in that we have a deputy president who is an executive deputy president. Remember, we've been having a vice president who has not really been like taking charge when the president is not there. And the cases are staggered in such a manner that when the first suspect is there, the other one, because the cases are different. When one is there, the other one is here in the country. So their argument is that they can still run the country even when they're there, and the government has its own systems and structures that, notwithstanding the president being away, it can survive. So that's really the point.
So what next for Uhuru if he loses at the polls?
After elections, we will have cabinet secretaries. Now, these cabinet secretaries will not be members of parliament, and the parties will be able, or rather the ruling party or the coalition that has formed the government will be able to pick these people. Remember, there are 22 cabinet portfolios, and these people can pick even a loser in the presidential ticket. That's possible.
That the Uhuru Kenyatta family have big pockets is an open secret. They own the largest land holdings in Kenya, with thousands of acres of prime land spread across the country. Among many assets, they own Kenya's largest dairy company, as well as stakes in a local television station and a commercial bank in Nairobi. According to recent publications by Forbes magazine, Uhuru's personal fortune is estimated to be about 47 billion shillings or $500 million. He was rated among the top 40 richest men in Africa at position 26. On the second week of February, the court is set to determine the eligibility of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto to vie for elective posts in accordance with Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity. Despite the ICC case being viewed as the only possible hindrance against him, Uhuru is still convinced he can go all the way, deriving his inspiration from a famous quote that says, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." Could Uhuru Kenyatta's belief propel him to defy the odds and emerge Kenya's next president? The Road to Statehouse analysts' interviews were shot at Classic Mouldings. Classic Mouldings, bringing spirit and soul to interiors across Africa.